Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight, my good friend Cara St. Louis returns to the show. Cara is an author and an alternative researcher. She has two great books out at the moment. One is The Sun Thief, and her most recent title is Dangerous Imagination, Silent Assimilation. Cara just finished up The Great Remembering, which is the first in a series of several workbook episodes she is planning on releasing, which will pull back the curtain and expose the forbidden knowledge of the Matrix. Tonight's conversation with Cara is wide-ranging as always. We talk about her research into the work of Anatoly Fomenko and his theory of phantom time, where he posits, as does Cara, that huge chunks of what we think of and have been taught as true history is complete fiction. We then delve into the parasitical force which has commandeered the minds of much of humanity, and finish with Cara offering her insights on her next episode dealing with the Fae. And so without further ado, here's Cara St. Louis. So, Cara, welcome back to the show. It's always a pleasure to have you on. And today's discussion, I think we're going to major on what you refer to as an episode, and it's about the fact that time and history has been fabricated. I read the entire work over the last 2 or 3 days, and it's very, very good.
Oh, good. I'm glad you liked it, Michael.
No, it was great. And the most amazing part was it did not surprise me that history was obliterated or history was removed or was fabricated, made up. There is no end to what these lunatics will do in order to maintain their control and their power. So I've said enough. So maybe you can just take us through this a little bit to help the audience understand what the heck is going on.
Yes, I will certainly do my level best to do that. And it's really interesting that you looked in the book and you thought, yeah, that's what's happening. It just means that you're kind of, deep enough into the rabbit hole that nothing surprises you anymore. And another thing, I will back up and preface this in a second, but when you use the word fabricate, Michael, we think of the word, we think we know what that means in terms of them always lying about sort of, what's going on with political situations or why we actually went into Iraq or, all of those sorts of things that we would call fabricating history. Man, my friends, you have no idea about how much fabricating is a nice word for what's going on around us right now. Anyway, let me back up really quick because Mike's kind of trying to identify what it is that I'm presenting. And it's kind of, it's a unique kind of thing, I think. Y'all know that I wrote a book with Harold Katzfeld called Dangerous Imagination, Silent Assimilation. And when that book came out, this character I know and you all probably have heard of called Duncan Rhodes, who runs around Australia and operates Nexus magazine globally, suggested to me that I serialize it. However, since it was supposed to go out both of those parts together to achieve an effect, I decided not to do that. I didn't really, the whole idea of serializing it was kind of like a hubcap that clanged at my feet. It just meant nothing to me when that book came out. I thought, yeah, okay, right. Anyway, this is the second book. And in fact, the first book, this particular book, which I call the workbook, and there will be a third book, it's a collection I'm writing, and it's called the Imagination Chronicles, okay, and it's a trilogy. This is the second book. Now, I am taking Duncan's advice on the second book, the workbook, and I am serializing it because it will probably end up being 500 or 600 pages long, number one. And that could take me a good year and a half to get all together. Number two, the information that's going into the workbook is absolutely critical and vital. And you won't believe it how important it is when you see the things that are coming out. And it is exactly what it says it is. It's a workbook. I'm putting together 50, 60, 70 pages per what we would call chapter. I'm calling them episodes because, frankly, episodes is a literary term. It's been stolen by the idiot box, and I want it back, and I'm going to use it. They're episodes. They're standalone episodes, which we could also call chapters. But because they're self-contained, a chapter kind of gives you the idea that everything is more seamed together than it may be between some of these topics. For example, the first episode, which Mike is talking about right now, is called False History, The Great Remembering. The second episode is called When the Temple Burns, the Door to Ephesus Opens, and it's about, ready? It's about the absolute primary seed race that I have discovered, Michael. The first seed race. Information is out there. It's an open secret, but not in the English-speaking world, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So you see how those two things, those two episodes are pretty intense and pretty mighty on their own, and they do go together in some ways, but those are definitely standalone topics. We can get into the second one a little bit today, and in about a month, I'm going to knock on your door and make you interview me again, because in about a month, the second episode's going to be out, and it's about the Fae. Okay, and where they come from. I know the planet. It's an open secret. Okay, this is the most amazing thing. I wept when this was translated for me. There's a fellow in Germany called Gerhard Landmann. He's been trying to get this information out since the early 80s, and of course no one listened to him. They all thought he was a lunatic, etc., etc. He's probably not going to be with us very much longer. And I would like to get this. When I heard it translated, like I said, I just about wept. I could not believe what I was hearing, because it pertains so closely to my own life. Every freaking Post-it note I left on my body came up, boom, 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 boom. I was like, no! So here it is. It feels very much like I finally got all the pieces I need, and that I'm going to be taking what I'm putting into the workbook and lecturing on it probably for the rest of my life. And that's okay, because it feels like that's why I came here. Anyway, let's go back to the false chronology. Now let me think, how did I come across this? Oh yes, I do remember I was looking at a YouTube site called New Earth. New Earth is one word, Newearth, and it was just one of those quote-unquote random things. And the woman that runs New Earth is called Sylvia Ivanova. She lives near Vienna. I have emailed with her, etc., and I've been told that if I want to come to Vienna, I can interview her. But she's not looking for a public persona per se. She's putting out tremendous amounts of material, but she really just doesn't want to be, Bruce Jenner on the front of the Wheaties box about it. She just wants to put it out, and I can interview her if I can get to Vienna. Anyway, nevertheless, the first videos that I saw that she put out were global captures of the planet, and not too high off the ground. But do you know that this planet is covered with irrigation ditches, irrigation channels, irrigation tunnels that you would say were hundreds and hundreds of miles long and perfectly spaced apart? Do you know they're not roads? And to me, that was intriguing. It was indicative of a very advanced civilization. One doesn't think, oh gosh, was that yesterday? Was that 1,000 years ago? Was that 2,000 years ago? You just look at it and you think, wow, where did those come from? Why haven't we ever seen that before? But literally, there's a fellow, Schoenberg. Anyway, the videos are on New Earth, and so that led me into her site, and I started looking at her material, and that led me to a fellow called Anatoly Fomenko. Anatoly Fomenko is a Russian mathematician and astronomer, really of the highest order. He works for Moscow University, and he started looking into what we call the chronology. Now, before everybody goes to sleep, the chronology. It doesn't sound too exciting, and that is because of how one describes a chronology. Well, a chronology is just the history that we live with. And why do we? Yeah, the history. Why does that matter? Well, the history and the timeline and all of that is the tool that we use to justify certain actions, whether it's a war or a ascension of a monarchy or a country claiming to own another country. Do you know all of the geopolitical activity that we engage in on this planet is justified primarily by the chronology, and it's also called the consensual chronology. It's also called Scaligerian, and that's because the guy who put it together, his name was Scaliger. Anyway, so Fomenko started looking at this chronology, and he looked at it based on the work of another Russian scientist Morozov, who worked on it till about 1932. They found that there were mathematical and astronomical anomalies with the chronology. You know, we keep track of time based on things like eclipses and comets and, you know, predictable things that cross the night sky, or constellations and how they turn. And there was a period of time between 300 and 700 AD, I believe. I'm going to check those figures in my book. But when the moon just kind of seemed to have lost its ever-loving mind and sped up and did a bunch of, you know, loop-de-loops and half-gainers and all kinds of things that it shouldn't have been doing. So naturally, astronomers are interested in what that is. And interestingly enough, the reason that they were interested is because it didn't match up with the chronology, with history. Now, instead of looking at the history, which is a man-made, manufactured item, calendar, and saying, wonder if there's some mistakes in here, they decided, led by a NASA scientist called Robert Newton, that in fact there was just something unfathomable and wrong with the moon's orbit. And I think this guy is still alive, and he works for NASA, and he's still maintaining that there's something wrong with the moon. The moon, Michael, not the chronology, the moon, okay? Now, it has settled back down, okay? So you're just talking about a period of time when it just went berserk. The bottom line is, during that period of time when all of a sudden the night sky wasn't dependable, I think what they've managed to prove is that they've inserted an extra 1,000 to 1,200 years in our chronology that never existed, okay? The Middle Ages is a complete fabrication. It never existed, all right? We are much, much closer to Egypt and Greece and Rome than you can possibly imagine. We're only a few hundred years away from survivors of the Atlantean culture, and it's been in the predator's best interest to try to wipe that from our memories and our consciousness.
So, Cara, let me just make sure I repeat that for the audience so that they make sure they understand that. So what you just said was that there's 1,000 years that is total fiction.
Yep, absolutely. And more than that, there's 1,000 years, there's a period of 1,200 years, and there's a period of 300 years. Okay, that just got, and all of a sudden these phantom dynasties started to appear on the record at about that time as well. Most of them are still scattered across the globe in seats of power, okay? Now, the reason that this is difficult to talk about, Michael, is because it's so vast. And right now I'm talking to you and I'm talking to all my friends who have outlets like this as part of helping me figure out how to talk about this, because I know so much about it. Now, the research that I put together, the research that I did, the learning that I did to cull that 50, 60 pages, that's the first episode of the workbook, covered 42 videos and 2,000 pages of Fomenko's work, okay? And I tried to distill it down into 50 or 60 pages. I'm still trying to learn how to talk about that and make sense to everybody, okay? Because I want to make sense, all right? But as you can imagine, this is absolutely grand, okay? For example,
it's absolutely mind-boggling when I went through it, you know, and like I said, you know, it didn't surprise me that the people who are controlling would do something like this, but when you take a step back, Cara, and you think about the planning and all the deception that had to be plotted, and strategized about and then put in play, it's absolutely mind-boggling.
It is, absolutely. And these people think in long term.
That's right.
We have to start learning to think in long term, Michael. We only think in, 30-second sound bites, and that's pretty much on purpose. But these people think about hundreds and hundreds of years, things that are hundreds and hundreds of years in the making. Okay, so let's go back to a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to add to what I've told you and what I've told everybody about the Prussian education system. Believe it or not, this kind of plays into that. We're going to talk about the Jesuits. That's not a surprise. I would love to know who the freaking Jesuits are actually working for. They're not working for the Vatican. They're behind the Vatican. They're maneuvering the Vatican. So, and I believe that there's something behind the Jesuits, but right now, they're calling the shots, and they've been calling the shots for centuries.
We have a Jesuit Pope as we speak.
We do have a Jesuit Pope. It's
Right.
Petrus Romanus. I'm positive he's the last one. Anyway, for whatever reason, I'm just positive he's the last one. Now, this could get a bit confusing, so if it seems that way, Mike, help me sort it out, okay?
Yep.
But honestly, we have to talk about the Jesuits. And the one thing I want to say, insert right now before I forget about it, is when we were talking previously about the Prussian education system and how that was a result of Frederick II having lost to Napoleon at the Battle of Jena in 1805, or we think it was 1805 anyway. In fact, that is the case. In fact, the Prussian education system was developed as a response to soldiers turning around and fleeing for their lives, and we can't have that kind of thing. We have to have a robot as part of our army. Okay, but what I did not know at the time is that not too long before that, there had been a pope, and it was one of the Clements. I'm going to say it was Clement the 13th, okay? It was one of the Clements, and he was so petrified, so scared of the Jesuits and what they had become that he actually decided to banish them. He disbanded them. And they fled to some fairly non-Catholic countries. I think France was one of them. Is France considered non-Catholic? Well, anyway, they did go to France. Regardless, then there were these. He didn't live long after that, by the way. That's a surprise, right? He was assassinated. Then, during the Napoleonic Wars as well, Pope Pius X had been captured and was sitting and rotting in a Napoleonic jail cell. When he was released from that cell, he fled. He went back to Rome, and he reactivated the Jesuits as his attack dogs. He reactivated the Jesuits with a passion. And it was about 1815. And it was 1818 that the Prussian education system rolled out, okay? They were absolutely part of that. They were absolutely the masterminds behind that. The Jesuits run all the education in this world. They run all the education in this world except hopefully my beloved Waldorf. But they do run all the universities, the public school systems. They're behind those paradigms, okay? So let's make sure that we understand where the Jesuits stand in relation to the world in general right now. And now we go back to the 16th century, and we find a fellow called Josephus Scaligarius, or Joseph Scaliger. He was a French Jesuit, okay, and a university professor, and referred to himself as a Venetian prince, and all kinds of things like that. And he's the one who gathered up all the materials he could find, created this chronology, and by the way, not one of those originals is to be found anymore. Every one of them disappeared in fire. Every one of them. You can't find the originals anymore. You can only find the copies from which Scaliger worked. So he also had either a successor or a co-worker. I think he was probably working at the same time. However, he's considered to be a successor, called Denis Pitou. Dionysius Petravius is how he styled himself. And he was also a Jesuit and a French monk. And those two men, with the help of the Benedictine monks in France, created the common chronology that we use today, okay? In point of fact, it can be proved that Christianity did not exist at all before these men went to work. Okay, before the 14th century, there was no such thing as the Christian church. It was a fictitious invention of the Middle Ages, and Jesus Christ, whom I'm sure lived as a human being at some point, was in fact a medieval character. Based on the astronomical data that would have accompanied, the events that are earmarked as accompanying his birth, that would have happened about 1185. Okay?
Okay.
So I imagine what's happening now, or what will be happening with your listeners, is they're going to start becoming overloaded with the enormity of what's going on here, okay? Which is why the workbook is put together the way it is. It's very simple. There are a few examples. For example, Fomenko developed a system of 35 criteria for having a look at the various dynasties that are represented in this chronology, okay? Fomenko is actually also a brilliant statistician, and he found several dynasties, many dynasties actually, that plot point for plot point for plot point are actually the same dynasty. That includes the Jerusalem of Jeroboam and the Third Roman Empire. It's the same thing, same dynasty, which helps me understand why, when I read that Wilhelm II of the first Prussian dynasty had himself declared the king of Jerusalem. They all overlap. It's all the same thing, okay? Rome, for example, was established right on the heels of Troy. That happened in Italy. That happened in Italy, and in fact, there was no such person as Aeneas. There were no such people as Romulus and Remus. In fact, Rome was probably established by one of Ulysses' sons. Okay.
So, hold on, Cara. So, I just want to make sure that we do get the audience to stay with us here. So, essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, what Fomenko did was he took a look at data points. And he took a look at events in history, which were people and like events that took place. And he said, hey, wait a minute. These things are not serial. They're not this happened and then this happened and this happened. He looked at it and said, I'm finding commonality, a lot of commonality between these supposed two different events or these two different monarchs or leaders or battles or whatever.
Right.
That these are not different. These are the same. They are the same event. They are the same person. Now, there might have been different names attached to people. There may have been different cities labeled. But at the end of the day, he was looking at the construct of the situation. He was looking at the construct of the person, of the battle, of the event. And he said, wait a minute. This is virtually the exact same thing as over here and over here. Now, what are the odds that
I can tell you. They're 100 billion to 1.
Okay, so I got it right? So he looked at it from that perspective, and he started, right? So his interest got piqued, and he said, wait a minute. Let me take a look at this now a lot closer, because I'm starting to believe that what we're looking at is the same event, which has been extrapolated out serially to make it look like a much longer period in history when, in fact, it's much shorter.
Right, exactly. And the fact is that was an opportunity for many dynasties or blood families to establish themselves when they had absolutely no right to do so. And that's every dynasty that's in power today.
So it established longevity. I've been doing this for this long, basically, right? So I have a right.
Existing at all.
Okay.
You know?
Okay.
These dynasties showed up that you go, where did that come from?
Yep.
You know? All of a sudden, there it is. Oh, this is the first of this, and it led to this, and now Elizabeth's on the throne. Well, you know what? It's all crap. It never happened. It's made up, and it's made up over generations, and it's still going on. So now what's happening is most of the non-English speaking European countries, Russia, it's going on all over the world, Michael. The chronology is being aggressively challenged all over the world, and frankly, it's been challenged since Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton tried to write about this right before he died. He wrote a couple of books just on this subject and how this chronology was complete hogwash, and he managed to get one of those books published right before he died. That's one of the things people don't know about Newton, because Newton has a colored checkered past like the rest of them.
Right.
You know, but he was also a master chronologer, and he was trying to say, this is not happening. And he's not the only one. Johannes Kepler said it. Johannes Kepler said, Scaliger has seduced me. There's nothing more frightening than studying the chronology, because it's wrong. Kepler said that. Oswald Spengler said that. On and on and on it goes. Everybody knows that this is wrong. It's just a matter of trying to get the word out. And now in Russia, I will say that Flamenco's got probably hundreds of academics working with him, and these people are top-notch. These people are running universities in Russia. These are not, and they're trying to bust this wide open and really try to come up with the actual chronology. Now, Flamenco will say that he can't know anything before 900 AD. That's because he's a mathematician and a scientist. Okay, and as far as he's concerned, and frankly, as far as many people are concerned, he's proved something astonishing in a way that most people can relate to. For me, it's about astronomy. For a lot of people, it's about maths and the astronomy and statistics and all of these things. And so this is scientism. It's proof that people can believe in. And that's great. We have to get that out in front of people and keep it out in front of people. You know what, Michael? I'm really sick and tired of being lied to. Okay, I'm fed up with not knowing what the hell's going on.
They lie about everything, Cara. I was on
Yeah.
a show with Oli, and we got into this conversation. I said, Oli, everything that's worth knowing is a lie. Period.
It is.
Period. Everything that's worth knowing is a lie.
Yes.
End of discussion.
Exactly.
It's really incredible.
Right. And then the only histories you can really count on are oral histories, like the Vedic. Like the Veda is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the Norse mythologies, which aren't really myths. I've come across recently this Irish battle called the Battle of Moytura, which is actually much, much older than, what was that battle that Miles Johnston's always raving about? Battle of the Boyne? Yeah, the Battle of the Boyne, which actually he's right to rave about it. It was just a Masonic ritual. It wasn't a real battle,
Yeah.
It was William the Conqueror taking over, James handing it all over to William Orange. So it does matter, but there's a battle that's older. See, this is what happens. I'm very, very lucky. I have people translating for me from German. I have people researching in Russia. This would not happen for me in the United States, Mike. You know that. I
No.
would never have access to any of this. I would
No.
never, which is why I'm trying to get it back in under the radar, right?
The Russians and the Germans are way, way ahead of. I mean, the Americans are reading the boxes, the back of a Wheaties box. That's the extent of what they read, whereas there's a lot of stuff coming out of Germany, and there's a lot of stuff coming out of Russia, which is really, really going to be game changers if it can get traction.
Well, you and I and people like us have to get it into the American consciousness and also the Australian consciousness. It's not just us. It's English speaking. It's the English speaking world, Yep. I'm a little bit, I have a little bit of an advantage sitting here in London because everything I say rides this pipeline out from the financial spider web, It's like I'm hitchhiking on their outflow of information. They don't stop me because everything has to be pouring out of here like a big old fire hose. You can't stop it because they're doing their business. They're taking care of their stuff.
Yep.
And I'm just riding on it like a turtle, like a frog with a wind sail and trying to get my stuff back into the States. So, but the thing is, yes, you're absolutely right. Russia, Germany,
Yep.
The Germans are doing such good work. They really are doing such good work.
And the Germans really have to do it under the radar.
Oh man, talk about under the radar.
Yep.
Absolutely. So a couple of things that are really, really important about this is that we are much closer to Egypt, Greece, and Rome than you can ever possibly imagine. It is actually understood and fairly well accepted in Germany and the German-speaking countries that the Habsburg dukes, whom you would consider to be a medieval sort of bunch, went to gladiator contests. Those things happened at the same freaking time, Mike.
Yeah.
Nero was in touch with them. Nero granted the Habsburg dukes certain rights in Rome. Nero. Now, we see those two things as
completely separate, right?
Nope, happened at the same time. It's like, our lives, our history has been pried open so they could pour in these dynasties that that trying to justify these dynasties that don't belong, and it's the Jesuits who are behind that.
Hmm.
The Jesuits, have you read the Jesuit Oath? You probably have. It's
Well, I read it in your
Oh, did I put? Yeah,
you
see,
had it
I'm
in your
working so.
episode 1, right, that you sent me. Now the thing
Yeah,
was,
yeah.
it's vile, it's
It
violent,
is. It
right?
is.
Now the thing is, what struck me is as I was reading it, I had read the many of the Masonic oaths, which they call their obligations.
Yeah,
It's the same stuff:
yeah.
violence, death. It's amazing to me. You have all of these secret societies and their oaths, their obligations, things that they swear on. It's all
Hmm.
of this reprehensible, violent mentality and activities. It's just
Right, right.
unbelievable.
So there's a couple of other things that I want to mention, and then you ask me anything you want to,
Sure.
obviously. Um, there's a fellow in Germany. I don't think I've said this on the show yet, but there's a fellow in Germany called Erhard Landmann. Erhard Landmann is in his 80s, maybe even his late 80s by now, I don't know. He was an IT specialist, a very OCD kind of researcher. You can see his lectures if you want to. They're in German. They're not, particularly exciting to watch because, like I said, he's got this overhead projector and he's an IT guy and, the pocket protector and stuff like that. However, he did amazing research. He has done some absolutely amazing research. There are a couple of things I want to point out to you. First of all, I'm going to save the best for last in my opinion, but first of all, Erhard Landmann has access to Old High German. He's old enough to know some of that and to be able to find things out in Old High German. He can decode, Michael, all of the glyphs. They're all Old High German. They say things. They're Old High German words. Okay?
Hmm.
And he demonstrates that by putting, random Mayan glyphs or any other kind of glyph up and like drawing lines around the words. That's Old High German, and he can show you that for hours at a time. Now that's not my thing. That's my husband's thing because my husband's German and he has some access to Old High German. I can't go in there and say, "Oh yeah, right. I agree. I concur." Because I don't have access to those languages. But this is something that Landmann's been talking about, and it deserves to come out. Now, the second thing that he talked about, which you can read more about right now if you want to on vortexcourage.me, because I put an article up there not long ago called "The Women of Quay," and I spell it because he spells it that way, Phe, the Women of Quay. Now, periodically, for the last couple of years, I've been talking about the fact that I identify very, very strongly with the Fae and trying to figure out what exactly that means. Now, some of that is just, what it means to me, which isn't particularly important to anybody else, just me. And some of that is because maybe it's important for the world and I'm not sure why. I mean, I've been saying for a while, the Fae are back, the Fae are back, the Fae are back, I've been saying it to Maria Wheatley, who's, master dowser and a mystic over here at Avebury, and she agrees with me, but, no one seems to know what to say about it beyond that. So here's what I'm going to say right now. This is an open secret amongst some academics. There is a planet in the Big Dipper, the bottom left-hand corner, okay? It's called Phecda, 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 bottom left, okay? It's in front of Ursa Major. It's not really, Big Dipper's not really part of Ursa Major. We just think it is. Anyway, this planet is where the Fae come from, Phe. Fae is all around us. If you look around, you will see either Fae or Phe or Fey. And so many words, so many place names, so many statements. I mean, it's just, once you start looking for it, it's everywhere, okay? The Fae have been, the Fae, in my opinion, the Fae are probably the original seed race. Now, one of the reasons, I'm going to be writing about this in episode 2, so I'm not going to go into it too much unless you ask me a question, then I will answer it to the best of my ability right now. However, if you look up at the Big Dipper, it is it's a polar star. It circumnavigates the pole by the seasons, or it appears to anyway, by the seasons. every year. And if you watch it go around, and there are videos where people are, have demonstrated this, that what it looks like when it goes around. But as it goes around, it forms a swastika, Michael, right above our heads. Yeah, you knew this.
No, I was nodding because I know that the swastika is not this symbol of evil.
Right.
That it's an ancient mystery religion sun symbol. So that's another thing amongst many, many things that have been taken completely out of context and presented as a symbol of evil or darkness and so on. So the reason why I was shaking my head was, again, this does not surprise me.
No. And wait till. So you've got the big clue in the sky. Okay. You've got this big clue in the sky with the planet Ficta at the bottom left, right? And you've got the swastika all over this planet. Ancient cultures have embraced this sign. It's one of our most cherished signs, and yet it got, in the 20th century, it got absolutely inverted.
Right.
Which is what the 20th century was all about, inverting everything.
Right.
Turning it to the dark side. Okay, so there's that, which is like a little Post-it note that the Fae left all over this planet. Recently, I saw an article. Did you see this? Because it popped up on Facebook. But there has been a huge swastika show up near Roswell in the desert.
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, I saw it. It came to my mind because my brother was born near Roswell in 1961. I mean, all of these things in New Mexico that I have such a close relationship with, and the swastika in the Hopi culture and all the Native American cultures, right? My dad, I was born, you know this, I was born almost dead center in the Four Corners area. If you bend those four corners, what are they? That's you know what I mean?
Yep.
That's where I was born, and I was born at straight up midnight between time and space. All right? So this just spoke to me. When my husband started to translate Mr. Earhart's work for me, it literally put me on the floor, because it was sort of like a clue after a clue after a clue after a clue after a clue that I had been sort of holding in my consciousness my whole life, trying to figure out what is this ever going to be, and it just came to me. Okay, so the second episode is going to be about the Fae. All right, the Fae, like I said, the primary seed race as far as I'm concerned. Now ask me some questions, Michael, because this is huge, and it's really hard for me to keep it all in my brain at one time.
Yeah, no, not a problem. I want to just go back to something that you said before, Cara. You had mentioned that the original source documents and texts all gone.
All gone. All gone, bye-bye. Yep.
Right, and this is something that is pervasive when you go back and you try to dig in and do some research. As an example, I did a lot of research years ago. I spent over 3 years researching Christianity.
Yeah.
And just as an example, there is not one original document available that is in the Bible. So in other words, the Bible, if somebody said, so do you have the original Gospel of John? The answer is no.
Exactly.
Right. So do you have the original book of Romans? No. So, so what happens is everything is a copy of a copy of a copy. And you mentioned this in your article, right? So there are people that are up to no good, and when they are scribing and updating, making changes, they are intentionally putting fiction into the storyline.
Exactly.
But there are other people that are well-intentioned, and because of mispronunciations or not really knowing who this person is, or right. So what will happen is names will change, cities will change, pronunciations will change, and so on. My point being is that this whole issue where we have history, but we don't have any source documents to speak of, is something that people really need to get their heads wrapped around.
Yes.
Because if we don't have source documents, then where is this stuff coming from? That's what you have to ask yourself. Now, I'll make a guess that we probably do have the source documents. It's sitting in the catacombs under the Vatican.
Under the Vatican, that's right. There's under the Vatican,
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
football fields under the Vatican, because
yeah.
there's got to be miles and miles and miles of tunnels under there, right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
My bet is that they have virtually everything
Hmm.
that is worth having, which would explain
Right.
existence. It would explain the origins of humanity, history,
Right.
obviously, and so on. It's just we have this miserable, miserable group of
Right.
people that are completely manipulating and lying to
Right.
all of humankind, you know. So
Right.
we don't know which end is up. You know, they could send you off on rabbit holes. In fact, one of the questions I was going to ask you, I'll ask you the next
Mm.
question after I finish up here. It'll send people off, very good intentioned people who really want to learn the truth, into areas which, at the end of the day, is complete fiction.
Hmm.
And this person will come up with a very logical presentation, whether it be a book, whether it be a presentation, a seminar, a lecture,
Right.
whatever it may be. And they're so versed in
Hmm.
explaining what's going on and what they found. But the problem is that they inspected and they wrote about fiction.
Exactly.
And they don't know it. Because one of the questions I was going to ask you is people are going to be listening to this and they're going to say, all right, so they lied about a big, big piece of history. It never existed. It was complete fiction. It was formulated. It was fabricated. It was made up. So
Yeah.
somebody, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people listening to this, are going to say, okay, well, how about all the researchers, the scholars, the historians that have studied history and wrote about it and researched it? I mean,
Yeah.
people on the other end listening to this could say, this seems impossible. This seems like, how could the controllers cover all of their bases to the point where somebody who's doing a deep dive into this stuff, deep into the rabbit hole,
Hmm.
hasn't uncovered the fact that there are missing pieces? I mean,
Right.
big missing pieces. We're not talking about little missing pieces. What we're talking about here is huge pieces of history which does not exist. It never happened. How come these people that are doing this work haven't discovered this? How come we only have a handful of people that are stepping forward and saying, hey, wait a minute, I think I found something here?
Right. Right.
So how do
Well,
we answer that?
Well, first of all, they started in the 16th century. Okay, it's the 21st century, so they've had a lot of time to get rid of all the evidence, and they've built this, they built the original structure, and then perhaps people of ill intent or people of good intent both came along and just started adding and adding and adding based on falsities, based on information that they were given that was erroneous, had no had nothing to back it up, no proof, no original documents, and then lie upon lie is built upon lie is built upon lie, and so forth. And one can go back and find 150 sources now to justify a lie's path, up the path of one lie, of one giant lie. That's very much on purpose the way they put it together. A couple of other things that we have to bear in mind. First of all, the chronology is being very aggressively challenged outside the English-speaking world. Hello, America. You don't know what's going on out here.
Yeah.
This is what I'm saying. I mean, I recently said, and I laugh about it to keep from crying, Michael, because, we the English speakers live in a big bubble. We live in information lockdown. And it is going on out here. It really is. It's just that we don't know it. And so we think it can't be so. But it's being aggressively challenged. Now, I will say to you that the same computers that Fomenko and his mathematicians and his astronomer cohorts have used to come up with the statistical anomalies and the impossibilities and the mathematical proof that something was this way and not that. All of those things that they're using supercomputing for right now, the other side's using supercomputing to close the gaps, all right, to close the holes.
Yeah.
So for the rest of us, the race is on. We've got to get the truth out there. There are a couple of reasons it matters more than anything. First of all, did you realize, I'm sure you did, that most of the American presidents, if not all of the American presidents, claim to be related to or descendants of either Charlemagne
Yeah.
or is it Henry II?
Yeah, there's a video on YouTube where
Yeah?
they trace the bloodlines back. Yeah, you're right. Yep.
Yeah, Charlemagne never existed though. So do you see how that happens?
Yeah.
Charlemagne didn't exist. He never existed. And yet they all trace their noble, regal, their social status, their social bank account, if you will, is
Right.
hugely elevated if they can say things like that. And it's not real. It didn't happen. That's one thing. And people justify, for me personally, it takes a whole lot more than that to justify a lot of these things. However, I will also say that we are within a couple of hundred years of the survivors of Atlantis, whom I personally, and I am on a quest to prove this to the best of my ability, believe are the remnants of the Fae, the seed race, okay? We're only a couple of hundred years removed from that. You look around this planet and see these amazing structures and things, and you go, who did that? Who in the world could have done that? And how is that possible that that was done with medieval tools? How is that possible that that was done with stone tools? Well, you know what? It isn't possible.
Right.
The fact of the matter is these advanced civilizations have really very recently existed.
Right. I mean, even the pyramids, and they talk about slaves on scaffolding,
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
No, there's no way that happened.
Totally bizarre. I mean,
No.
You didn't have a bunch of people picking up, 10-ton stone and
Right.
putting it up on scaffolding and and pushing it up and laying it on top of the other stone. It didn't
Right.
happen. It did not happen, folks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also there is all kinds of evidence that indicates strongly that 200 years ago, or just a little over 200 years ago, these are people who understood this planet. They understood how everything works. They understood things like how you get, 10-ton rocks to move up several hundred yards they understood our planet in ways that we've lost. And I'm sorry, but I do not consent to having that just disappear into the mists of them not wanting us to know about it because Dick Cheney wants to frack himself into $1 kajillion. I'm not okay with that. I don't consent.
Right.
Okay?
Yep.
It's near enough to us that we can grab it. We can turn around, reach back, and grab it. And if you're like me and like, most of the people on this planet, and you look around and you say, what is going on? What the hell are we here for? Why are we here? What's happening? How is this our life?
Right.
It's because it isn't our life.
No.
It isn't.
No. And the thing is, Cara, I tell people that we are so adrift, we are so far from the mothership that it's not even funny. And the problem is, you talked about information before. I just want to make this comment. People will say this to me, oh, but Mike, we have so much information available to us today. And I said, look, information doesn't mean it's good information. There's tons of bad information. Information is just information. There's good information, there's bad information, there's everything in between. Mm-hmm. So when they tell you you're in the information period, the information age, information technology, and so on, that's a meaningless term. What they do is they put it out there, and it essentially becomes a metaphor for the human mind to basically define it the way they want to define it. It's like when Obama says hope and change. Mm-hmm. Well, it's not defined. It's not specific. Well, what do you mean by hope exactly, and what do you mean by change exactly? Could you please tell us what you mean? No, instead what they do is they just put the words out there, and then they allow each person to walk about and go about their business interpreting whatever they believe those terms mean. And the same thing applies to information. There's a lot of people that believe, because there's a lot of information out there, that we have a wealth of knowledge. Mm-hmm. No. And information and knowledge are not the same thing.
No. And, humanity is soul sick. Humanity is soul sick. You said they're adrift. We are adrift. We're absolutely adrift. And it's because we've been robbed of who we are completely and utterly. And the more we find out about what ways we've been robbed, you can't know the truth until you identify the lie, really. All right? And that's why it matters. We can turn right around and grab that from the past. I mean, you know, but what's really, I have not come across anything that creates a more abrupt cognitive dissonance than this. And it's extremely difficult to keep this in your mind. I mean, now when you research and you're looking at years and things like that, this happens, you know, I listen to my husband tell me, oh, well, you know, I'm looking at this research and, you know, because of this year and this year and this year and this year. And I'm thinking, how do you know that? Because those years, you and I both know that period in history is a complete fabrication.
Right, or it could be. If it's not definitive, it certainly could be. And this is what, and you're right, people have a hard time grabbing onto this because it's like, really? Like they would make up history, they would lie about that, and that really gets me because they, like I said before, they lie about everything.
Yes.
Everything, folks. They lie about everything. And so, exactly right. I mean, that's the problem. That's the thing is, like I said before, they send you off someplace, a researcher will go and take a look at a particular era. They might look at the Egyptian dynasties. They might look at Rome or Greece or whatever and really dig in, and not knowing that vast majority of big pieces or maybe the entire thing is a complete made-up story.
It is, and all it does is occupy their time.
Right.
It doesn't, you know, it's just a hamster wheel. I guess that's the best way to put it. This is another big hamster wheel, and we're all running around the hamster wheels so that we don't, you know, we don't opt for authentic lives or walk away from the hamster wheels to opt for authentic lives. And most of us have ethics and morals such that we would never dream of doing things like this. And so it's hard for us to believe that there are entities who would.
Yeah, now these entities, let's talk about that a little bit, right? Because we talk about the Jesuits and, you know, so we have people think in terms of who really are the Jesuits. And what I'll do is I'll put a link in the show notes to go into more detail about who the Jesuits are.
Yeah, good.
I'll do that so that people can, you know, dig in. We're not going to have time to go into the Jesuits for this show, but let's just put it this way. They're not good people, okay?
No.
And they don't have good intentions for humankind. But, Cara, just taking it a step forward, because when we talk about the Jesuits and we talk about the Vatican and so on, we're actually talking about, you know, humans, people, and so on. But
are we?
I know. That's most people.
That's
where I'm going with this. I want to ask you about that, because that's how most people will frame it, right?
Yeah.
The thing is, are we? Or are we talking about some kind of off-world, parasitical type of entity or force that is manipulating and essentially at this point in time in the driver's seat?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are a couple of ways to answer that, and based on where I'm at right now in terms of my understanding and my research is that when the Fae came to this planet, they split off, and there became part of them became people or energetic beings of ill will. Now, the question is, why would that happen? Well, now you're back to the infection, you know, that kind of thing. And I have actually said already in talking about this that I will sometimes talk about the good fairies and the bad fairies, because when we talk about the Fae, that's what people think I'm talking about, because that's how it came down to us through the generations. It became this mystical fairy thing, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the Fae, and the bad fairies, the bad Fae, chased the good fairies all over this planet up until a couple of hundred years ago, and the battle was one long battle. From the beginning to now, it's everything that you see in terms of cataclysm and war and bloodshed and all of that has been one long chase. I contend one long chase. And for ease of saying it, and just so people can, you know, sit up and take notice, I will call it the bad fairies chasing the good fairies, okay? Now, what is the infection? I think there is an infection here. I absolutely agree with that. People are trying to suss that out. What is the infection? If you look through it, maybe you know this already, but if you look at all cameras have the infrared capability disabled, yes? So that we can't take pictures in the infrared. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
Yes. Because when we take pictures in the infrared, we will see things we don't like.
Right.
We will see things we can't identify. We will see things that scare us. okay? And that has to do with the human field of vision, which I really don't let me forget to say something about that as well. Because believe it or not, folks, this goes to chemtrails. All of this goes to chemtrails, believe it or not. If you separate us from the star system by which we identify how things go with a new plasma, that's just separating us from proof. That's separating us from something we count on, a way that we reckon the passage of time. Humanity's always done that with the stars in the sky. Okay, but if we can't see them anymore, then we can't do that. So that's one. I mean, there are a million reasons for chemtrails. One of the other things I want to mention, I'm just going to say it before we go into this infection idea. Victor Schauberger, who wrote around the turn of the 20th century, 19th century, and was also a great friend of Rudolf Steiner, who most people don't realize that those two did a lot of talking,
Right.
Said that the only reason we can only see if there's an atmosphere. Human beings can only see anything if there's an atmosphere. So changing the atmosphere that we're seeing in, that makes you wonder about a whole nother encyclopedia of things, doesn't it? Because if they change the atmosphere in which we see, then we can't see a lot of things they don't want us to see, okay? That's another reason for changing the plasma that we're walking around in. Rudolf Steiner, who was very predictive at the turn of the 19th century, said that at some point this planet would be covered with a web. And he did not elaborate. It could be chemtrails, it could be the World Wide Web, it could be all of the above. But 100 and God knows how many years ago, he said that one day the planet would be covered in a web. He also said that the time would come when we would only be able to see in black and white. I'm not really looking forward to that time. I hope that he was wrong. But if you're changing the plasma and this atmosphere is the only way that we can see anything, could that happen, Mike?
Anything is possible with these people, Cara. I mean, look, you're talking about this. I'm thinking to myself, I can see this happening. And we talk about the aerosols and the chemtrails and so on. I mean, that is not a program that is for the goodness of humankind. The program is covert. Nobody is allowed to speak about it. And, there's a reason why they're not allowed to speak about it. They go into deep denial. Those are just contrails. I mean, I'm just saying all the stuff I know you know, but I'm just talking to the audience here.
Right.
So going along with Cara's point, so what exactly are they doing? I mean, if you have a half a brain in your head, you're going to look up at the sky and you're going to say that's not normal. The spraying, it's not contrails, condensation trails. What are they doing? What are they doing?
What are they doing?
Exactly.
Contrails don't drip, Mike. Contrails don't drip.
Right.
Chemtrails drip. I mean, there's a million ways that you can talk about it, but
But that's the web. I think that, and when you were talking about the web, that's what I was referring to. The first thing that came to mind was there's a lockdown with these chemtrails and these aerosols, but because they can put anything they want into those aerosols.
Exactly, and part of it is to keep us from sussing out what's going on around us, and some of us are managing anyway.
Well, biological
at least
warfare.
To some extent. At least to some extent. That's why I say, everything. Once I knew about chemtrails, things just started to fall into place.
Right.
Do you realize, Mike? I just said this, and I have to say it to you because you're probably not going to believe it, but it's only been on the 31st of March into the 1st of April, 4 years only since my house burnt down. 4 years I've come from my house burning down and grabbing that book out of the computer that became The Sun Thief to this.
Yeah.
That's how fast it comes once you start pulling a thread. If you keep going, and you've got to keep going, you can't help but keep going because it's going to come at you. There's no such thing as going back. You can't unknow the things that you know.
There is no going back. I say that all the time too.
Back.
No.
No going back.
Once you figure stuff out, you do not go back to where you were. You don't say, oh, you know what, I'm just going to forget about what I learned.
Exactly. I mean, that's that guy in The Matrix who wanted a steak again so bad, remember?
Yeah.
That he took, I don't know. Anyway, but there is no going back,
No.
okay? I don't know, there was something else I was thinking of. Ask me again because
Well, we were talking about these historians that would go back into time,
I
they're digging up stuff and information, and then they write books and do lectures and so on, or maybe they're a professor at some
right,
university somewhere.
right,
And what we were saying is they're basically presenting fiction. They have
junk.
mastered the telling of the fictitious story, yet they don't know that it's fiction.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I just interestingly enough came across, Michael Tellinger.
Yes.
I used to be a fan. I'm not a fan anymore. Um, anyway, he's got this. He buys quite deeply into Zechariah Sitchin's work, which I don't. And the fact that it's a truth sandwich. I'm sure there's some truth in there for sure.
Yeah.
But basically, he's pushing this idea that we're a slave race with our DNA altered, and some of that could be true, but I think the way he spins it is, and the way Sitchin spins it is incorrect, simply meant to demoralize us even further, that we don't, they took our batteries out, basically. We don't have the capability of being anything but slave, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so no, I don't buy into that. I just don't. Anyway, he's got this workout now. I think it's on Facebook, probably on his site as well, called The Alternate History. And I just started to laugh, and I'm thinking, boy, buddy, you have no idea what the alternate history actually is, because that's just another fairy tale that you're spinning for everybody.
That's another example where you have somebody who's gone off with good intentions and is spinning this theory,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
And there are just hordes of people that will follow and not question and not look into it and say, well, he's done all the work, he's done all the homework and the research and the studying and everything else. So I'm just going to default to the fact that he knows what he's talking about. And I'm going to get in line and
Yeah.
I'm going to follow his lead.
Yeah.
And we're not just picking on Michael as an example, right? 'Cause that's what you talk
Yeah,
about,
just as
Michael.
an example.
Just as an
Right,
example,
right.
there are so many people out there. And I agree with you on Sitchin's work. I have a couple of Zechariah Sitchin's books. And the one thing I never liked about it was basically it was a message that said, look, you were created to be a slave.
Exactly. I was
And,
not.
okay, so what's the message there? Like, should I just be happy that I basically am what I was created to be and just don't do anything about it? Or is it
Right.
telling me that I need to step it up and get out from under being a slave? I mean, that's the thing I never really,
Right.
that didn't resonate with me when I read his work.
Yeah. It's just put together. It's one of those things put together to hobble us, to keep us
Yeah.
believing we don't have any power. So I realize, of course, that this is a huge thing to try to bring to people. And in the end, people think, well, yeah, okay, but that's not an immediate threat to my survival. It's not a life or death situation. Chemtrails are, and chemtrails are part of this. That's a life or death situation. So why do I care? Well, same reason why we care about everything and anything and everything. I'm not handing this to my kids if I can do anything about it. I am absolutely not handing this to my children. I am not. If
Yeah.
anything, what I would like to hand to my children is a link to that glorious, empowered, beautiful, simple, wonderful past that isn't that far away yet. And that's what I think we have to, while we still have daylight into this, while we can see daylight into this, and they haven't closed the gap, we need to grab it and run with it and unravel it. And I'll tell you what, Flamenco and his team are working on what they would consider to be the closest thing they can come to a true chronology.
Yeah.
Identifying a false chronology is groovy. It is. You can't know the truth unless you see the lie. But it always begs the question, then what? Well, let's see if we can figure out what's real then. Okay, let's see if we can figure out what's real. And it's not just this little workbook that I'm putting out. The guy's got a website. You can translate it into English. It's got this English button. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Anatoly Fomenko, Fomenko is his name. I recommend all of the New Earth videos, but please begin at the beginning. I had someone tell me she had begun at the very end, which is very Wavo, Navo, out there kind of stuff and doesn't have a whole lot to do with history. And that's a mistake. Don't do that. Go to the first one. Go to the first one and work your way forward, okay? And stay tuned for more information about the Fae, because this is I strongly identify with the Fae, and I'm not sure I've ever told you about that episode, how I found out that I'm actually part of that seed race. I may have not have.
No.
Okay, October of 2014. I'm going to do it again, so don't even stop me if I've already said this. October 2014, Harold and I were in Leipzig doing a very, very important interview with Michael Vogt. And we came back to Berlin on the train, and Harold wanted me to come out to the farm where he lives with his girlfriend, and I'm so, so glad I never did that, because that girl sounds shaky. Wow. Anyway, so for some reason I said, no, Harold, I don't want to. I'm going to go to the hotel tonight. I'm never on my own. And if you're out there looking for, I'm never on my own, okay? So just forget it. So I said, I'm going to the hotel just for one night. So I go to the hotel, and most of us have these memories, maybe when we were adolescents or something, where sleep just overcomes you. You go to sleep, and you're going to go to sleep. And maybe you even wake up, and then you go, nah, I'm going right back to sleep. You just can't not. Okay, so I had one of those evenings where I was going to sleep. The next day, I woke up, got back on the plane, came back to London, and realized that I had a blister on both elbows, a blister on both knees, and I had a big fingerprint bruise right over my heart. Okay? Now, blisters, sure. I ate something that didn't, that I'm allergic to, something like that. Gluten does that to you. Anyway, but a big old fingerprint bruise over my heart? I don't think so. Not without knowing where that came from, okay? I don't drink. So it's not like I was, you know what I mean? Anyway, so I called one of my initiates, one of the two initiates that I work with in the United States, and I said, what happened? Here's the story. And he said, they were just checking on you. And I said, who's they? What do you mean they? They were just checking on you. He said, they were just checking on you, Cara. And someone put a hand right through into your chest to make sure your heart was okay. So that's my story. That's my story about how, and that's when he said, look, you are 100% connected to the Fae. And I thought, okay, well, I'm not sure what that means in this day and age. And that's what started my quest to figure out how that affected my life. And I thought that it was a personal quest. And it's not a personal quest. It's a seed race quest. It is another reason they might be trying to hide us from whatever's out there, okay? Because whatever's out there may be on their way back. But that's not a new theory either. It's just a question of who you think is on their way back.
People listening to this, folks listening to this, might be thinking, but how do we get critical mass to kind of connect into this? In other words, the timeline is wrong. The timeline's made up. History's wrong. There's gigantic chunks of it that have been made up. So how do we get people to pay attention to this? Because when we talk about the United States, and there's nothing but apathy here. People are just so busy looking at their feet, looking at their phones, and running off to the next sale at Old Navy. Right. And we could talk about this stuff, and even if we went to them and said, hey, look, the Dark Ages never existed, completely made up. The vast majority of the people would just look at you, shrug their shoulders, and just move on.
Say, so what, right?
Yeah, because somebody said to me one time, they were talking about the Apollo moon missions, and they were saying, if people just understood that NASA hoaxed the Apollo missions, this is, I believe they hoaxed them. I don't know what your take on it is, but that's my take on it. But they said, if people just knew, this is what this person was saying, it would just be a game changer. I said, no, it wouldn't. I said, they could announce tomorrow on all of the major cable news networks in the United States and on the network news that the Apollo missions were completely fabricated. They were a hoax. They never happened.
Right.
Have a nice evening. I said, nothing would happen.
Right.
You would have some people that would say, you got to be kidding me. And they would take it to heart. But my take on it is, that's a very small percentage of the population. Everybody else would just reach into the bag of Doritos and drink their Mountain Dew and change the channel and go watch whatever reality TV show or Dancing with the Stars or whatever else it is that, entertains them these days, whatever inane program.
right.
how do we reach those people? How do you get
Well,
seen?
I'm not sure we can directly reach those people. The
Yeah,
only thing that we can do is keep trying to reach the people we can reach. And the way we do that is that we never stop talking about it. We never stop talking about it. We never stop pushing forward, you know, and eventually they can't care, so we'll have to care for them
yeah,
until they can care. If they ever get to the point where they can care. But the reality is we're the ones who have to keep talking about this. We have to keep pushing forward. Have to keep saying what it is that we say over and over and over and over until we hit critical mass. And on some level, in some dimension of our existence, that battle is engaged. And it may not be in the physical world where the guy's sitting in front of, the football game with his beer and his Doritos, bread and circuses and all that.
yep.
That's not the visual arena. It's not in the visual arena where that battle is being engaged. That battle's being engaged in another dimension, and we're part of that dimension as well. And we're warriors, and we are in there fighting for this. But not in the ways that you would fight on the physical plane, which actually brings us back to the predator and the infection, Michael, because that actually was one of the things I wanted to say.
Yeah.
This idea of blood sacrifice, for as long as it's been around, I think we can trace the arrival of the infection to the times when these huge blood sacrifices started to occur, because that's one of the things that the predator feeds on. It's an energetic predator to a certain extent, not even necessarily a moral predator. And that, I think, is what's in partnership with the Jesuits. I don't know what the hell the Jesuits think they're going to get out of it. But what have they gotten out of it? They've gotten complete control, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if that, some of us, that pisses us off enough to do something about it or to keep talking about it. Those of us who see it have got to keep talking about it. And I really do think, for me, it really is as simple as what I always say. We love and in the end, we love our children more than we fear our enemies, and they will push us to that limit, and we run from there. So for me, it's about not wanting my children. I don't want this for my children. I don't want misery and slavery and lies and wondering why the hell they're here for 70 plus years and then they, leave the physical body behind or what. I don't want that for them. I love them too much for that. And I really think that the world that we're looking for is right under the surface.
Do your kids appreciate the work that you're doing?
Yes, to a certain extent, but it's taken years and years and years and years. And it's really probably taken their whole life, because I started out as a Waldorf teacher and they thought that was pretty dorky,
Yeah.
and there was a lot, nutty about that. And then when I started on this path, they wouldn't look at anything that I wrote. They wouldn't look at anything any of my interviews or anything like that. That was largely because it really was their grandmother who was run down in the street, and it was difficult for them to read that story over and over and over again. But now they do watch what I'm saying. They do watch what I'm writing, and they sift it. They don't believe all of it. Nobody should anyway. You should do your own research. But and I see sometimes, this is one of the ways that Facebook is actually good. I see sometimes posts come up from my oldest son that lets me know he's paying attention, right?
Yeah.
That lets me know that the shell is cracking and it's getting in. I was driving down the road with my daughter not too long ago, and with a friend of hers, and they were talking about the birth certificate scam. So yeah, it's getting there. It's really getting there. And I think my youngest son is more open to it than any of them. He just doesn't talk about it. But mostly it's because they want to know why they look into the future and they have no hope or happiness in the world that's there.
And it doesn't make sense, right? I mean, I had the same situation with my daughter, right? So, initially my daughter just thought I was out of my mind.
I know.
Maybe sometimes I am out of my mind, okay?
Right.
But I spent a lot of time talking to my daughter. Where it really grabbed her was when I started talking to her about the system of commerce. In other words, It's not a constitutional republic. You don't have a constitution. It's admiralty law. It's contract law.
Yeah.
So when I would talk to her about these things and I would have these conversations with her, so, 'cause, like certain things would happen in her life, and she would say, Dad, I don't understand why. This is really unbelievable. I have to pay for this, pay for that, this fee, that fee,
Yeah.
registration, light, whatever. And then I would sit down with her and I would say, now the reason why all of these things are out there, all of these fees, and the reason why they're trying to extract money from you is because the system is this. Now,
Hmm.
at first, she was like, I don't, what does that mean? But what's happened over time is as she gets more and more life experience under her belt and she's seeing these
Yeah.
things roll out, now things are starting to click. Now she's like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
remember when Dad spoke to me about that. So
Exactly.
what's
It's
happened
coming.
is it's coming together. The life experiences are actually validating the
Hmm.
discussion points that I'm having with her. So
Right.
that's something we have to do. And the other thing I tell my daughter is she's 20 years ahead of me as far as
Yeah.
awakening, okay?
Is she? Well
Yeah,
done.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like, my awakening really took place about 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And, where I really started to, I took a step back. I'm like, okay, what's going on here?
Hmm.
Whereas, she's 30 and she's seeing things now that when I was 30, I didn't pay any attention to.
Oh, yeah. Are you kidding me? It wasn't until, I mean, on some level, I've always been awake. Do you feel like that? That there's been an entity that's been living in you that's been awake and
Right.
kind of waiting for you to
But
wake
it
up?
was suppressed.
Yeah, yeah,
Right,
yeah. Kind
right,
of that's this higher self, you know?
right.
On the one hand, there's that, but on the other hand, that really wasn't until my mother was run down on the road,
Yeah,
you know? And then my house burned down, and blah, and blah, and blah. These things that just beat you up
right.
and wake you up. And that, like I said, that's only been a few years. So I do know last time I saw Hal, the older one, Mike's familiar with my children because we're friends, and I can't ever stop talking about them because that's the kind of mom I am. Anyway, last time I was there, Hal said to me, was standing in his room, and he was getting sort of, he's a Taurus, so he was getting kind of up in arms about something. And he looked at me and he said, I swear to God, if I find out that everything I've ever believed is wrong, it's like,
Welcome to the club, Hal.
and I'm thinking, God, I hope you do, but boy, is it gonna suck when
Yeah.
it's just so funny. If I find out everything I believed is wrong, I swear to God.
Yeah.
But yes, that's why I'm doing it. I'm doing it for my kids. I'm doing it for everybody else's kid. Why are we here otherwise? Jesus, what? To get a Lexus and then, piss off? No, I'm not here for that. If we're not doing this kind of thing, why are we here? And frankly, this whole generation is here to save us, and yet they're under such attack
Oh,
in every single solitary way. They can barely get up off their knees.
right.
It's our job to help them. It's our job to protect them.
Yeah, there's all out of front on the young people.
Yep.
Every which way that they look, every which way that they interact in society, they are being bombarded with propaganda, mind control. They're breaking down the mind-body dynamic with the aerosols, the chemtrails,
Yep.
vaccines, flu shots, the indoctrination system in the school systems. We could just keep going on and on
Yep.
and on. It's amazing, quite honestly, Cara, that any young person can come out of this not being an AI,
Exactly.
artificially, an artificial intelligence, because that's what they're doing. In fact,
Hmm.
I'll just digress here a little bit.
Okay.
The other conversation I have with folks is when they talk about, oh, the AI is coming. I'm like, no, 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 no. The AI is here.
Oh, yeah.
It's here and it's alive and well and it's
Uh-huh.
already in play because your thoughts are not your own for
That's
many,
right.
many people. And I want you to think about that, folks. Your thoughts are not your own. When you have a position
Hmm.
on something and you have a belief on something, take a look at your culture, your society, and your value system.
Right. Right.
Assess it. Is this something that you really truly resonates with you when you go within into your heart?
Hmm.
Or is this
Hmm.
something that has been instilled in you?
Exactly.
You
Is
know,
it autopilot?
right, exactly. And you
Well,
see that
and
today with a lot of young people. They have these knee-jerk reactions to things.
hmm
Oh,
hmm
that's racist. Oh,
right, right. Oh, that
it's
PC stuff. I
all
swear
that
to
PC
God.
stuff, right? They're always
Yeah.
shocked and they're always step
Yeah.
back, and then they go into the talking point mode that they have been taught in school, on TV, by
Right.
their a
Right.
university professor who is really nothing more than a handler.
Right. Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. A Jesuit handler at that.
Yeah.
Whether they know it or not, that's what they are.
So
Well, this is where detox comes in, Mike.
yeah,
I was thinking about this today and yesterday. This idea of detox, it's bigger than anything I've ever thought of. It's way more. It's your thoughts. Because I was just watching an interview with somebody. I wish I could remember who it was. Alfred Levermont Weber had him on, but it was old. It was 3 or 4 years old, and it's about what the archons really might look like. These little amoeba things
hmm
that are in the infrared that we could see if they would let us see them, and they actually those actually can get inside you and control your thoughts, and they don't really care why. They just want to feed off your energy, that sort of thing. And I thought so, and he was talking about the fact that if you can control your thoughts, they'll go away. They're not interested in you anymore. Well, isn't that a great thought, Mike?
yeah.
Isn't that amazing? You know what? There are various ways to control your thoughts. I have never practiced any form of meditation other than one Rudolf Steiner taught, which was he gave six exercises in a book called How to Know Higher Worlds. And the first one is a meditative focus on something that you pick, a pencil, a paperclip, whatever, and you're supposed to focus on that exclusively for like 5 minutes a day. Do you have any idea how hard that is?
Yeah, it's
But
very hard.
yeah, but when you do that, even if it's only for a 10-second, 20-second stretch at a time, you are shutting everything else out. Your brain is your own. And that is why he gave us that exercise.
You know what I've noticed is this is a way that I believe that I catch it because everybody's infected with this.
Mm-hmm.
And so it becomes a constant battle to maintain the higher frequencies and vibrations which bring out the truth
Right.
and your innate desire to serve creation. Okay, so this is what I catch sometimes, Cara, and maybe you have these thoughts, maybe you don't, maybe you're going to think I'm a very strange guy. So,
That's okay if I do. Go
but
ahead.
if I'm thinking about something where in my life where there's a conflict and somebody really ticked me off about something, and this doesn't happen all the time, folks, I don't want you to think I'm a lunatic. There's sometimes you have a vision or a thought of violence, you
Yeah.
know, where,
Yeah. Where's
right,
that coming from?
where you want to hurt them,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then I catch myself, I think to myself, wait a minute, where did that come from?
Right.
I don't want to hurt this person. I don't want to impose or inflict violence. So I think to myself, where did that thought come from?
Right. Oh, there's so many.
And as soon as you
Yeah.
think, as soon as you catch it,
Uh-huh.
it shuts off.
Yeah, exactly.
It goes away.
Exactly.
So that's something that I picked up on over time, and by the way, I don't have these thoughts all the time. I
That's okay.
have to explain
That's okay.
myself.
You're among friends now, Mike.
No, people listening are probably going,
My
okay.
name is Mike, and I'm violent.
You know how I
No, but
solve
you're right.
conflict?
That's absolutely true. It's
Yeah,
absolutely true. And you do have to catch yourself when you're thinking things like
yeah,
that. So,
yeah.
and stop it because we are manifestors as well. We are co-creators, and those thoughts that we have actually create that reality. And so we're that powerful. So we really have to think about that and stop that. But in fact, if practicing, these steps that Steiner gave us, and as as a Waldorf teacher, and I've been an anthroposophist with a big A, and I've been one with a little a, and all of those sorts of things. Those spiritual exercises are a giant pain in the ass. They're really hard to remember to do them, and and there's a reason for that because they really drag us to a new level. I do practice my Iyengar yoga. I think that's really important, but I'm actually going to go back to practicing these 6 steps, particularly the first one, because this idea of detoxing and taking my brain back for, God help me, could I do it for 5 straight minutes? Could I ever get that disciplined? I don't know. But gosh, I've now come to understand that if we can get our thoughts and our mind back just that much,
Right.
that what infects us will just leave. They'll get bored and go away.
Right. Right.
So, hey, isn't it worth it?
right? The
I'm
parasite,
going. I'm going for it. I'm going for it.
the parasite instills a mentality that lazy is easy.
I'm going for it. I mean, let's bust all the way out,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
Let's bust all the way out. And another reason I do this stuff is because when my young adult children say to me, Mom, how come? Why? What's for me? What's life going to be? You know, there's nothing to buy into anymore, but there's just a bunch of crap. You know, there's no American dream. There's nothing. There's MTV. I don't know, what is there? You know, if you're 23 years old these days, what is it that, because I'm so far removed from that anymore, Mike. I'm 33 years older than my oldest child, 37 years older than my youngest child. So it's been a while since I was that age and I had, you know, this dream in front of me, which in fact was a dream. So what are they looking at these days? What are they looking for?
I think I'll just break it up into a couple of categories. I think that there's a whole contingent of folks, young people, that are not looking forward to anything. They don't
Yeah.
think about the future. It's not on their radar. They just live day by day. And, you know,
Right.
they're, you know, whatever. They're going to school or, you know, they're working or they've got vices like drinking and drugs and porn and promiscuous sex and all that
Yeah.
stuff, from everything that has been basically delivered to them on a platter through
Right.
the media, right? So that's the existence
Yeah.
that they have. So those people don't look into the future because they just don't pay attention to it. It's just, if I don't think about it, it's not there. And so, and if you do try to get them to think about it, a lot of times what happens is they short circuit
Yeah.
because you're making them think about something that they really are not equipped to be able to formulate a response or a thought around. And then I think we have those young people that they are awake and they do look at the future and they do think to themselves, well, where is this going? How am I going to get there? How am I going to live a fruitful life? You know, I think a lot of what I'm hearing from the awakened today is, how am I ever going to get to a point in my life where I can retire?
Right.
That I can essentially go do the things that I want to go do in life. And this is something that was stolen from the population. I mean, you can say what you want about the system of commerce, the corporatocracy, but there was a time not so long ago, if we go back about 30 years ago, many companies still had pensions for their employees.
Right.
And that was all ripped out. It's all gone now. It's all gone. So I think a lot of young people who are awake are struggling with the fact that, look, they know they have to operate and navigate through this system. They realize that they can try to make change, and they will where they can.
Right.
But there's not going to be this massive overhaul like tomorrow. It's just not going to happen. The system has been around a long time. It's very subverted. The people who are benefiting from it are not going to just throw their hands up in the air and say, oh, the gig is up, you got me, so, you know,
Right.
it's going to change tomorrow, it's going to be benevolent. It's not going to happen. The only way it's going to change is that the good people have to force the change through. You have to just keep applying the pressure. So I think, you know, long-winded here, but
Oh no.
I think that's what a lot of young people who are awake are concerned about is this my existence? I'm going to go to work every day, wake
Right.
up, go to work, go to bed, get 7 hours of sleep, get up, go to work. What is that all about?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that has them very, very concerned because there is no retirement, there are no pensions. The 401ks, I'm telling you, folks, the controllers are going to make sure that every few years, every several years, that the stock market gets crushed, and that will eliminate any savings in the 401ks. And Social Security is just not going to be enough money to survive on. So something's got to give, and in order for things to change, you have to think long term. You have to think strategically, because if you're just looking at today, it's not going to change.
Right, exactly. And I think you're right, Michael, because I think all three of my children are exactly in that spot.
Yeah,
All three of them are
my
thinking
daughter is.
exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
And the reality is, okay, so if the question is then what else is there or what do we do? I think it's our responsibility to try to find out, to try to, you know, I mean, because what's the alternative? Jesus, what's the alternative? You got to find out what the alternative is, and it's not the system we're in.
Right.
The system we're in is just a giant energetic vampire suck.
It's a death spiral.
It's a death spiral and a death cult.
Yep.
And I want out, and I want my kids out. And so we have to figure out what else there is. And there was something else. See, there was a time, we forget, there was a time when it wasn't like this. There was a time when it wasn't like this, which is another reason I have a problem with Sitchin's work. There was a time when it wasn't like this, and it wasn't so long ago. It wasn't, okay? So help me out there, and help Mike, and help your children find out what happened, and, get the vampires off our back. Okay? That's why we're doing what we're doing.
Right.
And it is a big deal to go, oh my God, every bit of history I know is crap. It's pure crap. So this is why it's important. When I'm bringing the Fae in episode 2, I will make Michael bring me back on so I can talk to you about that.
Yes. Now, Cara, I wanted to ask you on episode 1 here, is this available yet, or is this still in
it's
draft?
out.
It is out.
It's been out. Yeah, it's been out. It's not expensive at all because it's a chapter. It's an episode. I'm serializing the book. Some people have pre-ordered the book on my Indie Kitchen site. Early on, they're getting kind of a deal because even though the whole book isn't out, by the time the book is out in a year or so, the whole thing, 500 or 600 pages long. So this is just bits. And the next bit will be out in a month, 5 weeks, something like that. And I will put all the bits out, and then I will put the whole book out. So, yeah, it's available, Amazon.com. It's available at Amazon. Of course, The Sun Thief is still out there, and so is Dangerous Imagination, Silent Assimilation, which is still a Cracker Jack book. Dangerous Imagination has got me recently an invitation to speak in Vienna, which I will do at the end of this month, on child abuse and child abduction, because they see that half of the book as a real outline of how we as a species our children have been abducted. Even if you have their bodies with you, they've been abducted. And so were you in your time, and so were your parents in their time. That's another thing that we have to come to grips with. Take your kids out of those schools. I keep saying that. Put your TV outside, even if it's on a dare. See if you can do without it for a month. Okay? And now that you know about the history, think about what your kids are learning. Think about what's being, the tops of their heads are being sawed open and what's being poured in there. Yep. Okay? That's what they're being taught. That's what we call schools. Okay? Is they're being indoctrinated, they're being brainwashed, and it's all bullshit. I mean, it's worse than I knew they were being indoctrinated. I knew that the behaviorists were at work and we were being inculcated and turned into soldiers and things like that. But the history that's being poured inside our children is just poison.
Yeah.
So let's get them out of there, guys. Come on. Well, we still in America have the choice. There are countries where homeschooling and alternative schools and things like that will earn you a jail sentence, okay, as a parent. Get them out of there. And I mean, it starts, by the way, at birth, in hospitals. They start trying to separate us from our mothers in the hospital. Even when you think you're in a good birthing center and all of that, we can see our mothers at birth. That's just a fact. So what's the first thing they do? They stick a damn ointment in our eye so we can't see our mother. They start trying to separate us from our parents the minute we come out. The minute we come out, okay? Then they take us away. I mean, how do we identify how do we, like any other living being, how do we identify our mother immediately? We look at her, we see her, we smell her, we touch her, all of those things. So they put that damn ointment in our eye. They take us away, wash everything off of us that would identify us as this baby that just came out of this mother. And then they inject us with Hep B. Is it Hep B? Yeah. To start that process of destroying us. And then they hand us back to our mothers. Yeah. But look what they've already done. Look what they've already done to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay?
The vaccines are unbelievable.
Yeah. It starts in the hospital. Even if it's just that antibiotic goop they put in your eye, they're making sure you can't see your mom. That's all that is.
Yeah.
Okay, so it starts there. We all, I mean, hospitals are, yeah.
Yeah, we have to keep going, Cara. I mean, this is not what life is about. It's not what
Nope,
existence is about, you know. And
nope.
sometimes I even think to myself, you know, for as awake as I believe I am or I think I am, I still have these moments where I think to myself, but I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah,
You
you know
know?
what? I want to wake up from the waking state,
Yeah.
right? That's it. We could wake up even from being awake. That's
Right.
beyond that. That's beyond that quest, Mike.
Right. A
That's
lot of
beyond that
people believe
quest.
because they declared themselves awake, they think that, you know, they're on top of their game. They think they've hit the apex of, you know, what their existence is all about. I'm like, no, no, no. You just woke up to some stuff, you know. And yes, it's good that you're on that path, but you're still in this system. You're still
Yep.
operating in, right?
Right.
So
I
anyway,
just don't. I just don't think we're there yet.
no.
I think we're still coming up, trying to get our heads above water. So let's keep swimming for the top because I can see it up there. But I want to wake up from the waking state, which is what I'm talking about in terms of this radical thinking, detoxing our bodies, detox it from. And we say detox it from the bad thoughts, but that just makes me sound like some idiot Hindu guru who's saying, you know what I mean? People are like, yeah, 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 new wave, new wave, new wave.
Yeah.
Hindu from, detox from your bad thoughts. That's not what I mean. That's, you know what I mean? That's not what I mean. I mean, literally infected in my brain, talking to me,
Yeah.
telling me that, I can get rid of that. Like they're like worms, it's like worms in your brain. Get rid of them. And you just have to do that by practicing some serious meditation
Yeah.
that's purpose driven, that's meant for that purpose. I don't think no mind is it. I know that it's a form of meditation, but I don't know. I think you have to take, I don't know, whatever. I'm not gonna try to judge what people choose for themselves. Regardless, detoxing there, I've talked about that I feel that most of what comes into our bodies as sustenance is biophotonic, and that the food we eat is just a big old poison. Over the next 5 years, I'd really like to change what goes into my body, and I'd really like to learn to actively harness some of the light energy that's out there. I think it takes time. I don't think it's a 3-week miracle process that I'm going to pay some Swami $500 to teach me. I
Yeah.
don't think that's what it is at all. I think it's a path. I think it's a cleansing path. I think it's an ascension path maybe of some sort. But
Well, plus the sun's got to be out. They
the
keep-
sun, see? It's the sun. Hello, chemtrails. Are we back to you again? We're always back to the chemtrails.
You got to
We've
see what they
got
did
to
here,
stop
Cara,
that.
today. You got to
Yeah.
they did here today. It's just
Really?
miserable.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
Yeah, it's miserable.
Oh my God.
Looking out
Well,
the window, folks.
my husband built something out in our backyard. It's not it's something new. One of these that he has learned how to build from somebody who's doing this in Argentina. And often there's a big blue hole punched in the sky above where we live, right above our flat. So I take heart in that. And that it's possible.
Yeah.
But this is why chemtrails has to stop. The other thing is there's a bit of cognitive dissonance still with chemtrails, even amongst people who buy into chemtrails. People will say, I don't know how we get these nano robots inside us, and I don't know how that this is happening, and how is it getting in, and is it an infection? Is it how's it? And I'm thinking, okay, so for 5 years I have been saying that self-replicating, and me and 100 other people all around the world, self-replicating nanobots are falling on us from the sky.
Right.
They are micron-sized. They are getting in, and they are then just setting up house and starting to self-replicate. I mean,
Yeah.
how many ways can I say that?
Yeah. Yep. I mean, I did a interview recently with Jack Hart, and he got into very deep research on the biological aspects, the biological warfare and research under the umbrella of MK Ultra, and that this research and this warfare was involved aerosols.
Yeah. Yeah, of course it does. The aerosol war. That's what it is. It's the aerosol war.
Yeah. It's out there. The information's out there, and people have investigated it and researched it and everything else. So when people talk about, I don't know how I got this or how that's happened or why I have more gallons or,
Mm-hmm.
hey, look, like you said, there is a dissonance, a cognitive dissonance that takes place. I mean, they're aware of the chemtrails, but then they disconnect from the fact that the chemtrails are probably and most likely the reason why you
Right.
have these symptoms or, you have these
Exactly.
reactions.
Exactly. And if you want to keep your brain functioning, I mean, I even wonder, because I happen to live with a homeopath basically, and because I'm not drinking fluoridated water because I'm not in the States anymore, out of the tap, I feel like I've got a fighting chance to keep my brain functioning.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I still often wonder at what level am I really operating right now?
That's what was my point before, like how awake
Yeah.
is awake,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So we just have to keep trying and keep going. Somebody has to wake all the way up. So it's like being what do you call it? The sober driver, the designated driver.
Yeah.
In a way, somebody's got to wake all the way up so that we can keep everybody safe until everybody can wake up. So that's my point. That's my whole spiel today, Michael, because there will be more. There will be more coming. Especially once I get the episode on the Fae out and I get back from Vienna, because I really do want to download what I find out at this conference. This is in the German-speaking countries. They're doing great things. This is an entire conference that has to do with the abduction of children. So let's see what they have to say.
Yeah, and then
bring
when you
that
come
back to America.
Well, yeah, when you come back, you can just fill us in on how all that went.
Yeah, I'd love to do that.
Yeah.
I'd love to do that. And I have to say, I had this thought, oh my gosh, I know what's happening. I was doing the dishes today, and I had this thought. You ready? I've told my kids today already.
You do dishes?
Yeah, I do dishes.
Kidding.
I was doing the dishes, and I had this thought cross my mind, complete with a visual. Man, we should just all hop in the car and take a trip down to Walmart. That actually crossed my brain. Now, who the hell said that or thought that?
Yeah.
I'm in London doing dishes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I should just get in the car and hop onto the car, and we should just take a trip down to Walmart. I'm thinking either I miss my kids on levels that I haven't even begun to, explore, or that was pretty damn random.
Or it's a reminder of how much work we still have to do, because once you go to Walmart, you realize we have a lot of work to do.
We have a lot of work to do. Yep, absolutely. So I hope it's been enlightening. Anyway, is there any other questions about, you know what? Get my book for sure.
Yep.
If you really want to go through Fomenko's work, please at least buy. If you can manage to buy his books, they're not cheap because they're 500 pages each. But if you can manage to buy the books and tuck them away, I recommend that you do, because they're going to disappear. All right? We're all fighting an uphill battle trying to keep our written word out there. I know 1 through 4. I have 1 through 4. I have about 2,000 pages. 5 through 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever are on Kindle, which I don't like because you can change Kindle. Okay, you can't get the written book anymore. But if you can get and you want to get his books, please do. They're for sale. But they are called History, Fiction, or Science by Anatoly Fomenko. All right? If you really want to get into this and you're a mathematician or that kind of thing appeals to you, dive into those books.
You send me all the links. I'll put them in the show notes. And this has been a fabulous discussion, as always.
Hey, thanks, Mike. It's good to talk to you. It's good to talk to you. You were off my radar for a while there, and I wondered if everything was okay.
Oh,
but
yeah,
there
everything's
you are.
fine. It's
There you are with your tie-dye and that thing on your hat. What is that thing?
That's a 45 RPM.
It is, darn it!
It's-
I knew that looked really, really
It's
familiar.
from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum in Cleveland, Ohio.
Yeah.
So it's one of my favorite
I knew
hats.
that looked really familiar.
You go to the Cleveland Rock and Roll Museum, and there's a big pyramid there. So you know that.
Of course there is.
Yeah. So so you know you're in Illuminati land.
You're everywhere. You're in Illuminati land. All right, Mike.
All right, Cara.
It's been good, right?
It's been great.
I'll talk to you very, very soon, okay? Don't disappear.
I won't. I'm here.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And that concludes another Sage of Quay interview, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion. as much as I did. Links to my guests' websites and social media are listed in the show notes below. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can get to the blog by typing in sageofquayradio.blogspot.com or simply head over to our hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.
Seems strange.